It is almost unbelievable that a sport capable of stopping nations, filling stadiums, and turning ordinary kids into global heroes was once treated as a public danger. Today, soccer is a universal language, a cultural heartbeat, and in many places, a religion without walls. Yet several centuries ago, the same game that inspires tears, joy, and obsession was considered a criminal act. Kings tried to crush it, governments outlawed it, priests condemned it. For nearly 400 years, soccer was chased through medieval streets like an outlaw refusing to die. The story of why this happened is far stranger and more dramatic than anything seen on the pitch today. And to understand it, we must return to a world where football was anything but a gentle pastime. The chaotic birth of medieval football. The earliest versions of soccer did not resemble the calm, camera-ready sport the world watches today. Medieval football, often called mob football, was wild, lawless, and explosive. Entire villages clashed like armies whenever a game broke out, chasing a ball through crowded streets, muddy fields, marketplaces, and sometimes even into rivers. There were no referees, no standard rules, and no limitations on how many players could join. The match only ended when one side successfully dragged the ball to a distant target, often many miles away. This brand of football felt less like a game and more like a festive riot. And although people adored it, local authorities viewed it as a threat to public order. Crowds swarmed like waves, pushing through alleys and over fences. Windows shattered, market stalls collapsed, chickens disappeared, bones snapped. Arguments escalated into fights. Medieval football was a spectacle of adrenaline, pride, and chaos, and the louder it became, the more it terrified those in power. To kings and city officials, this was not a harmless sport. It was a disturbance capable of boiling into rebellion. Edward II, the first monarch to declare soccer a crime. The earliest recorded soccer ban came in 1314 under King Edward II of England. Complaints from London officials described football as a menace that disrupted city life. The king issued a royal proclamation forbidding the game within the city walls, describing the matches as gatherings that caused great noise and many evils. To translate that into modern speech, the king was fed up with watching his capital turn into a medieval tornado every time a ball rolled down a street. The decree warned citizens that playing football could lead to fines or punishment. His true fear was not the sport itself, but the massive, uncontrollable crowds it attracted, crowds large enough to threaten royal control at a time when rebellion simmered beneath the surface of society. Football versus the military, a battle for discipline. Soccer was not banned only because it was noisy. It was banned because it distracted men from something kings valued far more: military training. During the 1300s and 1400s, English rulers believed the nation's survival depended on skilled longbowmen. Archery was the backbone of England's military power, especially during long wars with France. But instead of practicing with bows, young men flocked to football fields. Kings saw this as a direct threat to national defense. Edward III, Henry IV, and Henry V all issued repeated laws demanding that citizens stop playing football and return to archery practice. Henry V even threatened imprisonment for men who ignored the law. From the monarchy's perspective, football was sabotaging England's war readiness. They feared that too many boys playing football meant too few soldiers on the battlefield. What looks like entertainment today was once seen as a dangerous distraction that could tip the balance of war. The church's moral panic over football. While kings worried about national defense, the medieval church saw a different problem. Priests complained that football fostered gambling, swearing, and violence. They argued that it pulled young men away from church services and encouraged behavior that felt sinful and undisciplined. Football games often took place on Sundays or religious feast days, days meant for prayer. Instead of kneeling in church, young men were chasing a ball through streets with bruised faces and muddy clothes. Some sermons described football as morally corrupt. Others warned that it stirred up pride, anger, and rivalry. Priests wrote that players stumbled into church after matches with broken noses and torn clothes, looking more like warriors returning from battle than worshippers seeking peace. To religious leaders, the game was a spiritual distraction that threatened the soul as much as it threatened the body. The Black Act of 1477, football becomes a serious crime. The peak of early football's criminalization arrived in 1477 under King Edward IV. His government passed a strict statute banning several unlawful games, including football. The penalties were extreme for a sport. Men could face months or even years in prison for playing. The law warned that football encouraged unruly gatherings, property destruction, and dangerous fights between rival groups. For medieval authorities already paranoid about public disorder, football seemed like a breeding ground for rebellion and general chaos. These punishments reveal how seriously the monarchy regarded the sport. Football was not merely a nuisance, it was viewed as a destabilizing force, something capable of turning peaceful villages into battlegrounds. Kings who were constantly worried about revolts saw football as an unpredictable spark that could ignite bigger conflicts. Scotland's long war against the game. Scotland developed a uniquely long and intense struggle with football. From 1424 to 1603, the Scottish Parliament issued more than a dozen separate bans against the sport. Each ban repeated the same concern. Football was pulling men away from archery practice. The Scottish kings insisted that national defense required discipline. They believed football corrupted that discipline by encouraging irresponsible play instead of military readiness. Yet every time the kings banned it, the sport refused to disappear. Writers from the era note that football remained wildly popular. People treated the bans almost like challenges. Secret matches took place behind barns, in open fields, and in forest clearings. Rather than weakening the sport, the repeated bans strengthened its identity as a game of resistance and community pride. Why people loved football? Despite the bans, football's survival through centuries of repression speaks to its deep cultural importance. For ordinary villagers, life was hard, repetitive, and controlled by powerful authorities. Football offered a break from labor, a spark of joy, and a rare moment of freedom. It brought communities together, allowed friendly rivalries, and turned dull days into celebrations. People loved the game not just for the sport, but for what it allowed them to feel. Football was also a simple game to organize. All one needed was a ball, some open space, and a willing crowd. In a world without modern entertainment, football was excitement, connection, and identity. Banning it only made it more appealing. The game grew into a symbol of resistance against strict rulers, and every illegal match strengthened its hold on the culture. The evolution of football into a modern sport. By the late 1700s and early 1800s, the social landscape of Britain began to change. Industrialization brought more structure to daily life. Public schools started shaping disciplined young men through controlled environments, and football gradually shifted from a chaotic village tradition into a regulated sport. Schools like Eton, Harrow, and Rugby developed their own rules, forming the early foundations of modern soccer. These institutions introduced boundaries, limited team sizes, and banned excessively violent behavior. Although each school played a slightly different version, they all shared a common goal: turning an unregulated pastime into a respectable sport. In 1863, representatives from several clubs met in London to form the Football Association, establishing the standardized rules that define soccer today. By transforming itself, the sport freed itself from centuries of criminalization. Why football ceased to be a crime? The end of the football bans was not a sudden moment. It was the result of multiple factors that reshaped society. Urban development pushed football out of crowded markets and into dedicated fields. Military technology evolved away from archery, making the king's old complaint irrelevant. And as rules brought order to the matches, the sport shed its reputation for chaos and violence. Football matured alongside the nations that once tried to destroy it. What had been a symbol of unruly behavior became a symbol of teamwork, discipline, and athletic excellence. By the late 19th century, football was embraced rather than outlawed, celebrated rather than punished. It had risen from criminal status to global admiration. The legacy of centuries of bans. Although banning football seems absurd today, those centuries of restriction shaped its evolution. The sport was forced to leave the streets and find safer, more organized spaces. Communities banded together to protect it. Schools embraced it. Rules refined it. The struggle between authority and passion carved football into a game of strategy rather than chaos. In a strange way, the bans pushed the sport toward the greatness it enjoys today. Modern soccer has little in common with medieval mob football, yet the core spirit remains the same: passion, community, and the unstoppable desire to chase a ball simply because it feels alive. Football's journey from outlaw sport to global phenomenon is a reminder that human joy always finds a way to survive. Conclusion: football's transformations tell an extraordinary story. A game once criminalized by kings, condemned by priests, and feared by governments is now a powerful cultural force. What began as a chaotic street riot has become the world's most watched sport. This journey from crime to glory shows how deeply people value connection, expression, and excitement. It also proves that no law, no ban, and no authority can extinguish a game loved passionately by its players. If you enjoyed exploring this hidden chapter of football history, share this video with others who love the sport as much as you do. Also, please don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Keep watching, stay curious, and let me know which forgotten history topic you want uncovered next.